Hello fellow gaijins, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about contractions. If you don't know what contractions are, it's basically a way to make a sentence shorter and easier to pronounce. Why are contractions important? That is because the Japanese language has a lot of them. Japanese natives use them so much, especially when speaking casually. This video is part of a series about native Japanese and also about how to make your Japanese sound more native. If you're interested in watching that series, here's the playlist. Also consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss any future grammar videos I make. As I mentioned before, Japanese people love contractions and they use them even with just simple words. There are words that Japanese people just don't want to pronounce fully. They feel like it's too long, so they just shorten it. We will not really be talking about these kind of contractions in this video, but let me just make a few examples. In Japanese, smartphone is sumato-hon, but they just say smaho. A personal computer would be personal computer, but they say pasokon. Potato chips becomes potechi. Dragon Questo becomes Dracque. In a sense, you have to learn these separately. There are thousands of words like these that are commonly used by Japanese natives, so I cannot really show you a list and there's not much to explain about it. It's just that there is vocabulary that are contractions of actual Japanese words that are a little bit longer. They often do this with long names or foreign words like personal computer and smartphone. The contractions that are not just words are way more interesting to look at. The contractions we talk about in this video are not used in their written form. So if you want to write something in casual Japanese, don't use contractions, just write it out. The first contraction I want to tell you about is the Teiru Form. So the Teiru Form can also be used as just teru. So for example, watashi wa itteiru, which means I am going, can be abbreviated or contracted to watashi wa itteru. So instead of itteiru, the i is just left away and you say itteru. This is common practice in Japan. You usually do this when you talk casually, but you can also do this with a polite mas form. So itteimasu can also be contracted to ittemasu. As a reference, here are some more examples. Do you know the form teoku? Teoku is very, very commonly abbreviated to toku. For example, oite oku becomes oitoku. Keep in mind, oku at the end of the te form is basically to do something in advance. So you prepare something. So oboete oku is to keep something in mind. Oboete oku is then abbreviated to oboetoku. This also happens in the polite form. So oboetokimasu. These are some more examples. The next one is the sentence ending no. The no is often abbreviated to n when it is the informing ending sentence particle. So when it is basically the informal yo. Check out this guide here, which talks about this in depth. Iku no da. Iku no da is often said as ikunda. Taberu no da. Taberunda. Do you guys know the potential form? If so, then you have definitely encountered the rareru, which is very hard to pronounce for some people. So for example, taberu, which is an eru verb, becomes taberareru in the potential form. Japanese people don't seem to like this word, especially the younger generation, so they thought they want to abbreviate this. Grammatically, this is not correct, but many, especially young Japanese people just say tabereru. This works for all eru verbs. Neru in potential form in the correct grammar is nerareru, but many people just say nereru because it's way easier to say. Actually, using this makes your Japanese sound way more native, but you have to keep in mind that there are Japanese people, especially from the older generations, that don't like this form too much. So if you are in social settings where you have to be more polite, try to avoid this form as people might look at you weirdly. Actually, you should just in general avoid using contractions in polite settings. The next one is when you have negative imperative words. So taberuna, kuruna, suruna. All of these words have a contraction. So let's go through the same list again. Tabenna, kunna, sunna. As you can see, the n becomes double and the ru just disappears. Another very specific contraction that has some way a similarity to the one we just had is wakaranai. Wakaranai is often abbreviated to wakannai. I myself use this all the time. It sounds really native when you say wakannai instead of wakaranai. Of course, if you like wakaranai more, you can stick to it, but I myself prefer wakannai in casual settings, of course. Next on the list is the Teshimao form. Shimao is used at the end of a te form when you want to say that something ended up happening. So 食べてしまった, I ended up eating it. 読んでしまう, I will end up reading it. All of these can be abbreviated to ちゃう or to じゃう depending on the verb. So let's make some examples. 食べてしまう becomes 食べちゃう. 行ってしまう also 行っちゃう. 来てしまう is 来ちゃう. But now pay attention. 読む, which is 読んでしまう, becomes 読んじゃう because of the 読んで. So when you have で instead of て in the て form, you need to use じゃう. Have you ever heard someone say こりゃ? It's basically them saying これは何? これはボトル. これはパソコン. So これは can be contracted to こりゃ. Many young people do this, but especially dialects do this. Kansai Ben, for example, does this all the time. それは can also be contracted to そりゃ. Another one of these weird anime-esque contractions is つ. つ is basically the contraction of ていう. So for example, 何っていうの becomes 何つうの. This is a very casual way of saying ていう, and it is very often used in anime. A character that comes to mind that uses this a lot, and also そりゃ and not それは because he talks in Kansai Ben, is Heiji Hattori from Case Closed. Next on my list is 何か. 何か is often abbreviated to なんか. That's an easy one because there's not much to explain, but it's just, if you want to say something, so 何か, you can just say なんか. 何かあそこにあった. なんかあそこにあった. The last but not least are this and でしょ. This is always used as this when in a polite setting, right? But if you want to say this in casual speech, it sounds weird. So many young people or just people that talk casually a lot say す. It sounds weird when I say it by itself. ボトルです is polite, right? Because of the this. ボトルだ is casual. But if you don't want to use だ, you would just have to say ボトル without any copula at the end. Or you can say ボトルっす. It's a weird way of saying this, basically. Why would you use it? I don't know, but some people do. It's important to know about it. The same thing applies to でしょ. It just becomes しょ. For example, 昨日来たでしょ can be abbreviated to 昨日来たっしょ. So it's just a quick way of saying でしょ, a shortened way. These contractions are heavily used in anime to convey personalities, help the viewer understand what a background a character has and what kind of person they are. A character that has a rich background usually doesn't use any contractions. They have polite and eloquent speech. But someone who comes from the slums, has a lot of violence around them, they will speak heavily with contractions. They use contractions in every sentence. Yakuza, Yankee, all of these characters in anime are portrayed as rough characters with an unclean speech in a way. Pay attention to that. You will definitely see a big difference in personality when people use contractions in anime and when they don't. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Mata ne!